Good evening, everybody. My name is Rabbi Yaakov Rich from Congregation Torah's Chaim in Dallas, Texas. I am not giving the class tonight. I'm here for two reasons. One to speak at the beginning of this year and one to speak at the end of this year. First of all, Rabbi Fried, before I introduce him, is requesting that there be no questions during the shir. And if you would like to contact him, to please do so after the shir. Now, the topic tonight is about buying and shopping and supporting our local Jewish businesses. This is a class being given by the Dallas Rosh Kollel. Rabbi Fried has been the Rosh Kollel, amazingly, for close to 3 decades in Dallas, and the growth in Torah in the city is largely due to Rabbi Fried, bringing the Kollel and expanding Torah learning throughout the city. He is a worldwide respected Halachik posek, known throughout the world, has written many sforim, is an amazing Torah authority and learner of Torah, and it is a great schus, privilege to be listening to Rabbi Fried tonight. Rabbi Fried, please take it away.
Thank you, Rabbi Rich, and no pressure from that intro. Thank you very much. Rabbi Rich is a dear friend, and it's wonderful to have him with us tonight. For the past 3 decades, and Data has held classes and talks during the legal holidays, because the way the Jews celebrate legal holidays is through studying Torah. It's always an opportunity that we're off of work or we sort of have a little leisure time for us to delve more deeply into a Torah subject. And especially now that we are in a period of time of actually difficulty for a lot of our co-religionists, a lot of our fellow Jews here in Dallas and throughout the world during this pandemic. So it's very appropriate that we should delve into the subject of the mitzvah of supporting our local businesses, our local vendors during this time. So I just want to say first that I've received many questions on this topic from community members, and I'm hoping to be able to cover these issues tonight. I'd like to dedicate our learning tonight to the memory of my father, Mr. Andrew Fried, Nachman Tzvi ben Rabbi Cheskel Shvaga. May rest in peace. Tonight is his yortzeit, and he's a man who we're living through difficult times, a man who lived through far more difficult times, through a ghetto in Hungary and through numerous Nazi concentration camps, and came out always b'simcha, always joyous, amazingly industrious, loving and caring about others. And the words of Torah we learned tonight should be Ilu Nishmaso, it should be in his memory, and his memory should be a blessing. I just want to say that here in Dallas, I think there might be a technical difficulty. Are we still on? Okay. Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. The situation in Dallas, just as a preface, is not quite as dire as in some areas, such as areas of Brooklyn, New York, or many parts of Israel, where numerous Jewish shops and businesses and stores have closed down permanently due to the lockdowns, the numerous lockdowns, and the literally making it impossible for them to do business. So, and many more are in danger of shutting down in these places. So Dallas is not quite as dire of straits as it is over there, but nevertheless, our own local Dallas Jewish businesses are under great pressure, and many of them are truly struggling. So even before Corona, local businesses, and especially the small ones, are under much pressure due to the ease of online shopping, people seeking the most convenient locations, best prices, and against which the smaller businesses have a lot of trouble competing. Coupled with greatly reduced traffic during this pandemic time, where many people stay home completely, so they're struggling to stay open, many of them with great sacrifice, with blood, sweat, and tears, and with their very livelihoods depending on their success to stay open during this time. So this past year, especially this past 9 months, has been a challenge to a wide range of businesses and livelihoods. Most obviously, it's been our restaurants and our caterers, but as well as retail stores of all types, service providers, whether from doctors and dentists to real estate agents and consultants of all types, handymen, construction contractors, the list goes on of the Jewish businesses that there are locally here and throughout the country. We're focusing on Dallas tonight. So many of them are having a very difficult time staying afloat during this period of time. So with regards to food vendors, just for the purpose of our discussion tonight, we're referring to the kosher establishments. And the issue obviously is not among these establishments that their clientele is suddenly going to, for better pricing, throw off their observance of kosher and to go to non-kosher establishments. That's not the issue. The issue is whether for the caterers. So the main problem is that people are rarely during this time holding any events that require catering, which that's a death knell to a caterer where there's no catering to be done, obviously. And with regards to the restaurants, the kosher restaurants, so many people are preferring, and often rightfully so, to not eat out at all, to stay away from any public such situations. And this is putting some of our restaurants on the brink of collapse. Although curbside pickup is available, delivery options are available, but maybe people are not so much availing themselves of that and are just preferring just to stay away from everything and to stay home. So this as a given that the kind of situation that we're in, so it raises a number of halachic and ethical questions that face us. Well, just to name a few of the issues. Number one, what is our obligation? We, the people out there, the Jewish community, what is our obligation with regards to these, our local establishments? Are we required to go out of our way to patronize them at times with less convenience, even at a loss, paying a higher price than we could pay, for instance, by buying something online or by ordering through a co-op? Now, that's not necessarily true. If you'll compare prices to some of the local businesses here, not always are the costs really cheaper, but they have the appearance of being cheaper. And there are times that there are certain deals. So are we required to forego those better deals and to support our local businesses, our local restaurants, our local caterers, and local businesses in general? And if we are obligated to do so, to what extent? To what extent should we have to inconvenience ourselves, say to go to a more distant location to buy something from a local person, or to forego a better deal we can get online? What's the monetary requirements in that, and what are the inconvenience requirements that we might have upon ourselves in order to support our local businesses? Should we go out of our way at times, perhaps to order a kosher meal from a restaurant, from one of our local vendors, even if we might not need it or want it necessarily, and we can cook a lot cheaper, we can make a supper a lot cheaper at home, and maybe we even prefer our own home cooking, but perhaps, or is it possibly a mitzvah or an obligation to, at times, order a meal from a restaurant in order to give them the business, in order to give them that support? What if we ourselves are going through difficult financial times? How does that affect this obligation? So these are moral questions and actually halachic questions. Halachik refers to obligations in Jewish law. And just as a sidebar, that when it comes to moral questions in Judaism, for the most part, they mesh together with the obligations with halacha. There are no two separate systems, a moral system and a halachic system. Halacha dictates to us what is moral and what is proper and what is right. So in order to understand these questions, to get a modicum of clarity, so we, like we always do, we take a look at the Torah and the commentaries, and we delve into it, and we be able to extract from it the beautiful messages, and our moral questions will become clear. So there is a obscure mitzvah not so well known, which if we reflect upon this mitzvah tonight, I think we'll see that this mitzvah, although it's not so well known even among scholars, but if we reflect on this mitzvah, we'll see that this mitzvah is really the answer to all of these questions. The Torah states the following in the book of Vayikra. It says, Ki yamuch achicha umata yado imach v'chzachta bo ger v'sashav v'chai imach. This loosely translates as the following. If your brother is becoming impoverished, and his means falter, his business is faltering, you must strengthen him. V'chzachta bo, you should strengthen him, so that he can live with you, and he can live with you properly and in a healthy way. So this is known in Halachik literature as the mitzvah of v'chzachta bo, that you should strengthen him, you should support him. The Midrash Halacha, referred to as the Toras Kohanim, explains this mitzvah in the following parable, the following example. It says, if you see a person carrying his wares with a burden on his donkey, and you see that it's beginning to fall off his donkey, so you should rush over to help the person balance and reposition the burden on the donkey, help him keep it up there and resecure it in a way that's going to stand. Says the Medrash, because to keep it secure, to keep it on the donkey's back once it's already up there, one person can often suffice in order to keep it up and to keep the wares safe and keep the wagon driver going. But once it falls, it's such a heavy burden that sometimes even 5 people can't pick it back up and put it back on the donkey. So much better, and it's a mitzvah, to go and make sure that it doesn't fall to begin with, than to have to go and pick it up later on. That's what the Midrash explains. And it goes on to give an example. It says that if you see a fellow Jew who's struggling with his or her business, their livelihood, their parnasa, and they're not yet considered poor, they have not fallen to the category of being poor. They're still working, they're still trying their best, they're still out there, but they're becoming impoverished, like the pasuk says, that things are not working out so well. The business is falling, and allegorically, the burden is falling off of the donkey's back. It's tottering, and it could collapse. So the Midrash says that then, in that case, it's an obligation to help him or her out with a grant or a loan, or perhaps giving them some extra side work to do, to have more of an infusion of cash in order to supplement their income, to keep their business afloat, that it shouldn't collapse. Because as long as it's going, then with a small amount of effort and a small amount of infusion of cash, you perhaps can keep that business going, and the person then can endure and for years ahead will be in a good situation. But if it collapses, if it falls, it's far more difficult. It's exponentially more difficult to put them back on their feet. So this is called the mitzvah of v'chazakta bo, to hold the person up, not let them collapse, not let them get to the state of collapse, but to hold them up as best as possible. This is a mitzvah which is codified by Maimonides and the Rambam, and by the Code of Jewish Law, the Shulchan Aruch. There, the Maimonides is very fascinating. That although it might sound obscure, but when the Rambam, Maimonides, and Shulchan Aruch, they outline in the laws of tzedakah, the laws of charity, they outline 8 levels of charity, and they go from the highest down to the lowest. The lowest would be giving charity, but giving it with a frown. Then the next level will be giving it to the person, handing them a handout with a smile, and going from there, it would be to there's different levels of ideally not even knowing who you're giving to, and the person receiving should not know who you got it from in order to avoid embarrassment and shame. And it goes through different levels of up to 7 levels. The 8th level, the highest level of charity, highest level of tzedakah, says Maimonides and the Code of Jewish Law, is this mitzvah, v'chzakta bo, to support them, to allow them to stand on their feet and not to fall to begin with. It's a far greater mitzvah to enable somebody never to have to resort to receiving a handout, to receiving tzedakah, than it is that once he falls, to give them tzedakah. Tzedakah is a tremendous mitzvah no matter what. But the greatest mitzvah of all is to hold a person up that they should never fall to the need of having to receive tzedakah. And that's this mitzvah, v'chazakta, to strengthen them and support them. Now, the Chavetz Chaim, who's considered the greatest authority of Jewish law between the two world wars, in his book Avas Chesed, where he discusses many laws of kindness and helping others, he brings sources that say that one that fulfills this mitzvah, it's a guarantee for longevity. If you support a person not to fall down to the need for tzedakah, then that's a promise from the Torah that the person will have a long life. And number two, it's also a promise that you'll never have to end up on the receiving end, that you always will be on the giving end, not on the receiving end. So the emphasis on this mitzvah is very great. It's considered the greatest of all levels of tzedakah, and it's a promise of long life and of being able to continue to help others like you did this time throughout the rest of your life. Over 60 years ago, there was a question that was posed to one of the great Halachik authorities, Rabbi Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss of London at the time. He was the head of the Beis Din in London, and then later on, the head of the High Court in Jerusalem. He's well known for his responsive literature called Minchas Yitzchak. So a question was posed to him over 60 years ago. For the first time, chain stores became available throughout England, London and the rest of England. There was no, before that, there were only mom and pop stores, little privately owned businesses. But for the first time, chain stores appeared on the scene. And Rabbi Weiss, at the time when he writes this responsa, he writes the letter over 60 years ago. He says people are being faced with a terrible problem that these chain stores, because they have such a great volume, they're able to purchase so much, they're able to offer wares at a far greater discount than any of these smaller stores could even imagine giving. And that's putting all their livelihood in danger. So what should they do? Now, the essence of this happening in and of itself, it's hard to say that's a negative thing. This is an inevitable result of free enterprise, that these things are going to happen. But it is sad to see that in many small towns, especially in America, when Walmart or Costco or such stores came in, so it's well known that untold numbers of small family businesses went out of business the very next day. They were finished, and it's a global problem. It wasn't just a problem then, but at that time it was a new problem. So the petitioner that was addressing Rabbi Weiss was asking, what are we to do? What are we as the purchasers to do that we're able to now go to these chain stores and buy things at a far greater discount, or we can continue to buy from those traditionally we bought from all these years, from all of our co-religionists, from our brethren, the rest of the Jewish people that have these stores. What should we do? So Rabbi Weiss writes at great length, expounding on this mitzvah, v'chazakta, and saying that the mitzvah of tzedakah, as we know, is for a person to, sometimes you're giving away your own money to help others. And he says that this mitzvah, v'chazakta, to support another Jew, that they shouldn't collapse, the business should stay viable, it should stay strong, that they shouldn't come to the level of needing tzedakah. When this business is their source of livelihood, then this mitzvah is incumbent upon us of v'chazakta, to purchase from these businesses, even when it might be at the cost of not being able to get better prices that we could get in a chain store. That's what he writes over 60 years ago. And to apply that, it would apply in our situation today as well. Often, when a person has an opportunity to support a local Jewish business, you could find perhaps the same item online at a better price, which often we can, not always, but often that's possible. Then the mitzvah v'chazakta, especially in times like this, when already people are tottering, already the businesses are sometimes on the brink, and many have even closed. And it's certainly a mitzvah v'chazakta to support our local Jewish businesses. And at times, even though one might not necessarily even need a certain item, or like we said, might perhaps cook at home, and so this mitzvah v'chazakta would would put a mitzvah in our hands, to put the opportunity in our hands to fulfill a great mitzvah, to sometimes go out of our way, perhaps to purchase a meal at a restaurant, order a meal out, or even have something catered, have a Shabbos or part of the Shabbos catered, one of our caterers, in order to support these caterers that they can stay on their feet. One very important caveat I'm sure you all have in your mind: what about the loss of money? This is going to be difficult for us. So it's important to know, to point this out, that in order to fulfill this mitzvah, one is allowed, and it's perfectly fine, to use your meiser money, to use your tithing money. Meiser is the obligation that we have to give 10% of our earnings to tzedakah, to support poor people, to support Torah institutions. So since this mitzvah v'chzaktabo is in the category of tzedakah, it's not only in the category of tzedakah, but it's even the highest level of tzedakah. Therefore, one would be allowed to use their meiser money, to use their tithing money, to help support a business, given that the business is the main means of support for the owner of this business, and also perhaps for the workers that work there, for those he's supplying also their parnasa to, their livelihood to. Now, I'm not telling you to stop giving your very generous donations to data. That's not my intention over here. But you just need to know that you're allowed to use meiser money for this mitzvah, not for the entire amount that you're buying, but for the difference in price. If you make a calculation that I can make dinner tonight for X amount of money, and I know that there's a restaurant's having a very hard time, and I want to support them, it's going to cost me an extra $30, $40 to do that, and that $30, $40, you'll be allowed to use your meiser money to do that if that's going to help support that business. Now, you might ask the question that at times you might be supporting it. Let's say you're buying on a website that has a better price for, if it's kosher food or whatever the thing might be, kosher wines, etc. Then you might be supporting a Jewish business that happens to be online, which also might need that livelihood and might not having such an easy time. So how does that compare to supporting our local businesses? But with that, we'll fall back on a very well-known teaching. The Gemara says in Bava Metzia, the Talmud tells, and it's brought down in Maimonides and Code of Jewish Law, that Aniye ircha v'ani ir acheres aniye ircha kodmin. If you are being you have limited funds and you're being solicited to support the poor in your own city, and you're also being solicited to support poor in another city, then aniye ircha kodmin. Then the obligation rests upon you first to support the poor of your own city before you're worried about the poor of a different locale. Because each city has the obligation to support its own poor, its own needy people. So if you live in a certain city, then your obligation is to those of your own city before to another city. The only exception to that might be, say, off of mute, please. Thank you. That the only exception to that rule, which we're not going to talk about the details of, is that the poor of Eretz Yisrael are considered everybody's city. That's not our point right now. So therefore, if you could get something, even if you might be supporting another business, to order online from a city, from a business in another city, true, you might be supporting them. They might be also in difficult straits. But if you have the same item you can get from a local business, then ani ercha kodmin, then this mitzvah, which is under the category of tzedakah, would precede your obligation, would proceed to buy locally over buying something from out of town. Now, this mitzvah v'chzaktabo applies not only to, let's say, a business per se, that like a storefront or a restaurant or that was going through a difficult time, but it applies to, we have to think more broadly, a contractor, a subcontractor, someone to paint your house, someone to do work in your home, or a different consultant, a dentist. If you have if everything else is equal, you're going to get the equal level of output, equal level of work by a service contractor as well. So then the same mitzvah applies to them, and the Chavetz Chaim actually takes to task those who go and hire workers to do things and don't think first that of the mitzvah to support to bring support to those workers, that's literally their livelihood. They live sometimes from week to week, from month to month, and you have the opportunity to support them as well by hiring them. Then that mitzvah applies to them as well. Now, this also is, although it might be sometimes more convenient to order something online and not to go into a local business, but since we say that it's a mitzvah, not just any mitzvah, but it's the highest level of tzedakah, so tzedakah and chesed, kindness, are not things that depend on convenience. The Torah often requires us to sometimes inconvenience ourselves. We don't look for the most convenient way to fulfill a mitzvah. We look for the ideal way to fulfill a mitzvah, even if it might bring us some inconvenience, and that applies to this as well. Especially today, when in most cases our local businesses are accessible online, or you can order online, or you can order by phone, and there are delivery options, and there are also curbside pickup, especially now during the pandemic. So it's not even as inconvenienced as might have been once upon a time. Now, just to one last caveat on this is that this does not mean that one can never buy anything online or can never go into a more convenient store, especially when the item one needs is not available from the local vendor. And I think the main point that I'm trying to get across here, and we used to learn from this mitzvah, is it's a question of being mindful, to have it in mind, to be sensitive. Keep in mind that whenever possible, when certainly when all things are equal, or even there might be a slight loss involved, but to keep in mind that we have an opportunity and we have an obligation to support our fellow Jews and to keep those businesses from toppling and to be strong, and as well that the realization that by buying a simple article of clothing or article of food or whatever it might be, and I do it having in mind to support a local Jewish business, so then not only it elevates the mundane act of buying a simple item to becoming an act of a mitzvah. A mitzvah no less than lighting Shabbos candles or putting on tefillin, etc. So we can turn our mundane acts of purchasing to become a great mitzvah. Now, it's important to point out that this mitzvah of V'chazakta applies when the business that we're talking about, in which in most cases it is, but sometimes not. It's when this business is the sole or the main means of support of the owner of that business. Sometimes you might have a business owner that is, I don't know if he's independently wealthy with or without this business, or it might be it's just done to bring extra money in, or it's just to make the business available for the community, which is a great mitzvah on their part. So that mitzvah would not apply, because tzedakah only applies to someone who, without this business, if it collapses, then they'll become a tzedakah case. We're trying to avoid that. We're trying to keep them strong, not to fall to that level. But even in a case where it's not in the realm of chazakta of tzedakah, there's one more mitzvah that we should look into tonight. The Torah says in Parshas Bahar, "V'chisimkru mimkar lamisecha o kanomia rabisecha al tonu ish es achiv," which loosely translates as, when you make a sale to your fellow Jew, or a purchase from the hand of your fellow Jew, do not cause grief one to the other. Now, the grief that we're talking about, the Talmud explains, is to overcharge. You should not you should not overcharge another Jew, or you should not coerce the seller to undersell to you, to undercharge, to you. And those laws are very complicated. We're not going to go into tonight at all. That's the simple meaning of the verse. But Rashi quotes, again, the Midrash Toras Kohanim, that says the pasuk is hinting to another idea. He says that what it hints to is that if you have a choice to sell an item to a Jew or to a non-Jew, then you should sell it to the Jew. If you have the opportunity to buy an item, you could buy a certain item from a Jew or from a non-Jew, from a Jewish business or a non-Jewish business, then the Torah is telling you that you should buy that item from a Jew. Just on a sidebar, this is not a racist mitzvah, a racist statement, but rather it's a very beautiful mitzvah, which is telling us, as the Maharal explains in another mitzvah, that it's commanding us to look at our fellow Jews as our brother and sister. That of course we would give our brother and sister, or at least we should give our brother and sister, in most cases, precedence over anybody else out in the street. We always think of family first. I mean, we should think of family first. Even in the laws of tzedakah, we're supposed to, if you have two to give to, a family member or someone else, then your obligation of your own family comes first. So our own family, the Torah is extending to the entire Jewish people. That we're supposed to look at all other Jewish men and women as our brothers and sisters, and therefore we give them first choice to sell to or purchase from. So the authorities of Jewish law, they also, the Chavetz Chaim speaks about this, that this applies not only to purchasing, but it's extended also to hiring, like hiring a worker, contractor, also to lending money or borrowing money. The same laws apply, that if you have the opportunity, you should sell, you should lend to a Jew. If two people come to you for a loan and your funds are limited, then you should precede the Jew, because we're supposed to look at them as our mishpacha, as our family. Now, this mitzvah which is not explicit in the pasuk, but it's only hinted to in the pasuk, because it's only hinted to, there's much discussion among the halakhic authorities whether this is an obligation. It's a true obligation. It's obligatory, or it's not obligatory, but if you do it, you fulfill a mitzvah. Or some say it's just a dvar musar. It's just a sort of it's an ethical idea that we should have when we buy and sell, but it's not an obligation at all. So there's three levels of these opinions, and it's a lot of discussion, which we're not going to go into that tonight. But most authorities do rule that it is obligatory. It's a response of the Ramah, one of the authors of the Shulchan Aruch, or Moshe Isserles, holds that it's an obligation, but the Ramah says that it's an obligation only for a davar muat, only if you're going to lose by hiring the Jew or by purchasing from the Jew, you might lose a little bit. But if it's a great loss, then there's not the same level of obligation for this mitzvah as there is for the mitzvah of v'chzakta, what we talked about previously, which is truly the highest level of tzedakah. So, but this is an important thing, and it also dictates how we're supposed to have commerce. The Chavetz Chaim says we should always be thinking about this when we hire somebody. We should always have this in mind, that we have to first see if we can do it within our mishpacha. And this concept also applies since it's not a tzedakah idea, it applies even if both people are wealthy. If a wealthy person is lending, he's going to lend $100,000 for an investment, and he could do it. A Jew needs it and a non-Jew needs it. So this mitzvah applies to give that to a Jew as opposed to a non-Jew. If your funds are limited, again, and you have to have a choice of one over the other, we're supposed to look at mishpacha as family first. So now again, for this mitzvah as well, like we said, the last mitzvah, if it's going to have, you're going to incur more costs to do it, you're allowed to use meiser money for this as well. Your tithing money is able to be used for this. So this is an additional ethical reason to choose our local businesses wherever this mitzvah applies. So in summary, it's truly, we raised the question in the beginning, but it truly is our obligation to support our local Jewish businesses, especially when it's the source of livelihood to the owners, where in that case we said that it's the highest level of tzedakah to do that. And I think that we need to recognize the importance of our business, of our local Jewish businesses. They're a tremendous source of strength to our community. We gain so much from them by having them as part of our community. It's a defining factor of a strong, healthy Jewish community is to have strong, healthy Jewish businesses. And we really owe them, and this is our opportunity, I think, to express a debt of gratitude to our Jewish businesses, that often a great sacrifice, blood, sweat, and tears. When things go rough, they still try to stay open. And it's not only for their own parnasa, they really try to stay open to do a service to the Jewish community. So we really have to have gratitude to them. We have to express our thanks to them. And the greatest way we can express our thanks and gratitude to them is realizing that gratitude requires us to go the extra mile and to ensure their very survival. If God forbid they fall, then the community falls as well. And it's something that we have to really keep in mind and never forget. I'll just say that, of course, this is not the subject tonight, but it's a two-way street. It's a partnership here between the vendors and the purchasers, the people, the customers, and the businesses also need to appreciate their customers and not take them for granted, and do their best to make it as inviting and as easy as possible, as open as possible, to be able to do business with them. And so this way we have a two-way, a beautiful partnership between us and us and them, between the vendors and the customers. A number of years ago, when I first came to Dallas, I was in a furniture store, and I saw somebody who was visibly from a very different religion, and I happened to notice in that store, and I was asked, and they said I could take with me about yay thick yellow pages of all the businesses of that particular religion in Dallas. I was a little blown away how many there were, but also how well they're organized and they're looking out for each other, to have an actual yellow pages to be able to support their co-religionness. It was something really to take to heart. So for the first time, we actually are beginning to compile a list of Jewish businesses here in town. There's an amazing, those who don't know, there's an amazing website called doj.org. It's an incredible local website which brings together our Jewish community in many, many ways by informing us of simchas and of issues going on in the community, and many, many, many other ways that ties the community together. And in this way, this website, Rabbi Yaakov Rich, who introduced tonight, is the host of this website and has put it together with tremendous effort and ongoing effort. So I'd like to turn this over to Rabbi Rich to ensure that you all know about this list, to be able to peruse this list and to know who our Jewish businesses are out there to support, as well as the Jewish businesses that might not be listed, to make sure that you become represented on this list. So with no further ado, Rabbi Yaakov Rich.
Rabbi Fried, that was an amazing shir, amazing class. I think we all hear very clearly the obligation to support our local businesses and the great reward that is promised to those who do support the local businesses. One small clarification or correction, the website is dojlife.com, dojlife.com, DallasOrthodoxJewishLife.com. The birth of that website was about approximately a year ago. All the Orthodox rabbis were meeting, and Rabbi Fried was discussing with everybody and said, wouldn't it be great to have one website, the official website, that would unite all the different Orthodox communities? And with my background in graphic design, so I went home and created that website, and slowly but surely we've been getting it off the ground, and we use advertising to pay for the website. The advertising has been very successful in promoting local businesses in the community. And I thank Rabbi Fried for pushing to organize that website, endorsing that website, and all of the local rabbis for endorsing that website. dojlife.com. I just want to mention that a few weeks ago, I was sitting with Chaim and Miriam Goldfeder, the owners of Kosher Palette, and they were discussing how it would be so wonderful to have a Shop Jewish Dallas effort in the community, given COVID-19 and the difficulties that everybody has. Wouldn't that be great? So I, with my abilities and the website and online presence, we started a hashtag Shop Jewish Dallas. And I've been collecting a lot of Jewish businesses, putting them on a poster and sending that poster around through social media and emails, and it's on the website. And we started a Jewish directory of businesses on the website. So the advantage of having the directory of Jewish businesses on the website is twofold. A, it's a place where everybody can go and just see all the different businesses. It has all of the contact information. It has what they do, hours of operation, etc. And the other thing is now they're listed and they're searchable on the internet in this place as well, besides on Google and other, or in their own website. It's just an extra place to find them. And our website, dojlife.com, is very well optimized for the search engines. It ranks very high. So I just encourage everybody to please visit the website, sign up for the emails. You'll know what's going on. You'll be able to support the local businesses. And I thank Rabbi Fried for giving this class tonight, much needed class, and the information is so valuable to be able to support our local businesses. And thank you to Chaim and Miriam Goldfeder for starting this cause of Shop Jewish Dallas. And that's it. Rabbi Fried, to conclude. Did you want to conclude, or are we finished?
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much again for all your hard work in putting that website together and your ongoing support of the community in that way. I just want to end off with it, that it's our hope and our prayer that our local vendors and all of us survive this pandemic in the best way possible. This Shabbos, we complete the book of Bereshis, the book of Genesis. When we read the final verse in shul, then we all stand up together and we proclaim, Chazak, Chazak v'nis chazek. Be strong, and we will all be strong together. Especially when we complete the book of Bereshis and we begin the book of Shmos, where we talk about our entry into the deep, dark, and very long, bitter exile in Egypt. So it's especially appropriate that we enter that with Chazak, Chazak v'nis chazek, that we all are supporting each other and strengthening each other. So I just want to say that if we all strengthen each other during these times, especially through strengthening our local businesses, we'll emerge from these times stronger than ever before. So may Hashem give us the strength, the means, and the wisdom to be there for each other as one family. Thank you for listening.